Please welcome Alisha Arora, UNICEF Youth Ambassador, and Dominick Romano, the founder of Drainpipe, onto the stage.
So, Ms. Alisha, thank you so much for joining me today. You are one of the youngest AI researchers at MIT and across many different organizations globally right now. And the work that you do is so incredibly inspiring, not only to the younger adults in the world that are thinking about some very difficult problems, but also for the older generation, like such as myself, who's 32 and even older, who see this bright young girl who's out there, really like tackling some very difficult problems today. So to start, what got you into the work that you do? Like, what really sparked your passion for tackling some very difficult research problems? From positive reinforcement for mental health to some of the more difficult things that you've gone after. So.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dominic, and it's honestly an honor to be here, and specifically speaking on this panel of AI for social good. I mean, to start, AI for me was something that, when speaking about AI for social good, it really did stem from seeing that AI could be used as a tool for change for social good. And specifically, when I was in middle school, I lost a classmate of mine to suicide who suicided 13 minutes after tweeting about it online. And so he posted saying that he was feeling lonely, and 13 minutes later, he took his own life. And that moment for me was a moment where I started to ask, what if? What if someone saw his tweet? What if someone reached out? What if someone, gave him a message of support or kindness? Maybe he could have still been alive. And that, for me, was kind of where I was introduced to the realm of technology, and specifically AI. I reached out to social media companies and asked them, what are you doing? If you have access to data like this, why aren't you taking action? And so for me, that's kind of when I realized that if no one else was going to make that change, maybe I could. If governments, if corporations weren't going to do it, then maybe I could do it. And so for me, that's where I started looking into AI, and it kind of really stemmed for me as a tool for social change. I spent, nights learning about the complex models and neural networks, and even reached out to MIT to work and shadowed their AI research. And it was one of the most difficult journeys, just learning about, being 14 and learning about how complex the world of computers is. But I really had that drive and motivation, because from there, I actually started working on a model to detect suicidal ideation in social media content, where I'm now getting that work patented with support from Microsoft to actually build it out and hopefully implement that work in social media companies, so that a tool like AI, which, for us, maybe it's just something we look at as using it for optimization or predicting stocks. But, a tool like AI can actually be used to save lives or change the world. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got involved, and that's how it started.
That's incredible. At 14 years old is when you had this spark that said, I want to make a difference and tackle this problem.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You also do some additional work. You're the AI youth advocate at WEF. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I do also some work in the AI and policy space, and the intersection of that, what started as my AI and mental health research kind of led to an awareness, which I know we want to talk about later on, about AI and youth, and just how AI has just taken over our world, and is, also has definitely positive impacts, but a lot of negative impacts on the well-being and also on the human rights aspects for young people, and specifically how young people are so unaware of that impact. So over at the World Economic Forum, but also at UNICEF, I lead some of the policy work and engagements with the Council of Europe, the Government of Scotland, kind of working and consulting on how we can leverage AI and educate young people on AI and the effect it has on their lives.
Very interesting. So that kind of leads me to a question and a topic of this discussion that I've been dying to ask you, right?
Yeah.
as time goes on, we're seeing a proliferation right now of a novel technology, right? And many people who are researchers have attributed this technology and this technological evolution that's taking place in front of us right now to the discovery of fire in the fundamental change that it's going to have for humanity. And with that being said, and what you had said about some of the work that you do on making sure that youth are educated in topics like technology and artificial intelligence, what do you think would be the impact of us understanding the AI proficiency of populations and nations as a precursor or indicator for potential GDP surge, right? Because we know that artificial intelligence can help humans become more productive, right? And a more productive human is a more revenue generating result, right? And therefore you're generating more GDP in the nation. And so, how do you think we can look at AI proficiency across populations and nations to then have a better indication of how quickly that country can potentially scale?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I feel like we, in a way, are already doing it with just technology itself. And I think even with that, we can see all the discrepancies between countries and populations, and the impact that us as society is making. And comparing ourselves to a country that's not so advanced in the technological space, while a country that is, or has that knowledge, or has the tools to even leverage that, they're already, as you mentioned, there would be a huge impact on the GDP and our population and our output. But then when we talk about AI specifically, I think that's something that's so new. But even just with the advancements of ChatGPT or other tools, it's like I feel like AI can be. It can kind of make a blurry line between what is actually that human inputting and what is the technology inputting, but maybe for the better. And maybe that blur can help young people and help people kind of drive even more of an impact or more of an output, whether that is through GDP or whether that even is through social change. And it will kind of make an even better impact, a better idea. And I think if we can get more parts of the world and more communities to get to that level, then I feel like where we can go with that is just unstoppable. But I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Well, it's a great point, and what I would kind of point to is that Cornell University in New York they did a study on and it was called the flawed human heuristics for machine-generated language. Right, and what the study investigated was when you have prompts that are being, when you have completions to prompts that are being shown to a human, they compared machine-generated messages with human-generated messages and asked the human to pick which one was which. So, is it a machine or is it a human that wrote this message? And we're finding that the denser and denser that these large language models get, the easier and easier it is to trick us into believing that a human might have written it. Right. And that's something that's quite new, right? Because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have the architecture so well defined for language models that we do today. Yeah. Even though a lot of the same fundamentals that go into building these models are math, these are topics of math that kind of go back to the 1980s, right? Like way before our time. That's honestly, I think that over time we're gonna have to have these secondary models that kind of run in sequences and allow for us to be able to kind of extract different data points out that normally the human that's reviewing it wouldn't be able to as easily provide indication on, right? And it's important to have the human in the loop on decisioning, right? But it's also important to provide a human with as much data as possible to make the right decision. So.
Yeah, and I think with that, like, I think like we've known this many years ago, but I feel like AI has come to a point where it's like the only thing really lacking, and possibly will probably get there in the next few years, is probably that emotional, the emotional intelligence that humans have. But I feel like after that, I think we're coming to a really scary point where it's like, I think whatever humans could do, maybe just technology and AI and robots can do that as well. But I think with that, it kind of shows that, I feel like even as educators, and I think because educators have such an important role on really where the future shapes, and even talking about the impact that people make. But specifically for young people, we really need to be focused on, technical skills. I think one thing we can have that, but maybe those human skills is kind of I feel like the advantage humans are going to have in the next few years when AI is going to be taking over our whole world. So I feel like as educators, as people, that's really what we should be emphasizing on, that those emotional empathy, those human skills, it's so important that is what educators and leaders are focusing on.
I totally agree with you there. And, kind of to that point, something that I've found in some of the work that I do at the UN, specifically at the ITU, the WHO, and WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Office organization, what I've found there is that there's a tremendous level of input from researchers and from private industry that really includes that level of sensitivity that you're talking about. Right. Which really gives me a lot of faith in how well we're going to be able to adapt to this, right? Because when you have a human in the mix that's trying to navigate this, as long as there are those the empathy, understanding, patience. It's going to take us some time to figure out some of these things, and this is a very complex problem, which some of the brightest minds in the world are working on, right? So we don't really know everything just yet, and I think that as architectures of these models continually evolve, we're going to start seeing new issues arise, and then also new benefits arise, which are going to transform the way we even think about the subject.
Yeah, definitely, and I feel like with that, I think that the whole idea of AI for social good really comes in, where it's like, we have the tools, and I think especially at this point in time, AI is something that's become so accessible. Like, everyone can get their hands on it. Everyone can learn how to use it as a tool, but it's kind of what you do with that. There's so many people who are in this space and know what AI is and how to use it, how to build complex models, but how can we change what we're using it for to make the world better and not a worse place than we left it?
I totally agree with that statement. We've got to definitely make the world a better place than when we came into it, right? Yeah. And that's kind of something that's also inspired the work I do, right? As a contributor of AI for Radiology to the AI for Health UN Global Initiative, I want to make sure that when we're using computer vision models on radiology or medical imaging, that these AI models are safe to be deployed. And since we're still in the early days of that really rolling out in a widespread way, especially in Africa in particular, where the ratio for doctors to citizens is like 10,000 to 1, and then the ratio for radiologists to citizens is like 1 million to 1, and it's just they're massively overwhelmed. And there's, the infrastructure isn't really there to help people in the way that they need. So we really need to leverage technologies for good, like you're saying, to really drive that change, to provide some stability to certain regions that are most impacted by the UN Strategic Development Goals. The ones that we really focus on to help drive strategic development in developing nations. But now, my next question is: at 17 years old, you're a prolific researcher. You're doing amazing work. What's coming next?
For me?
Yeah.
I think for me, my journey has really just begun.
Yeah.
I've gotten introduced to AI, and I've been like, wow, it's such an empowering tool that I want to use to make a difference in the world. But I think for me, I always look at these tools like, AI, quantum computing. These are really just tools that I want to put in my toolbox to make the impact that I want to make. And whether that be in the field of mental health, because that's something that impacts young people, and especially in this generation, it's become such a prevalent issue. And making sure that if young people want to make the future that they want to make, because they may just be 10% of today, but they are 100% of tomorrow. So if they want to make the difference then I think something as simple as mental health support and resources is just needed. It's just basic. And so for me, I'm not too sure on the specifics, but I do know that I want to make a difference and use a tool like AI to do that. And, I think in a world where we have wars, where we have, there's all these climate inequities, it's so, so important that we use these tools as a tool for change.
Totally agree with you there, again. And, it's not an easy thing to like start the momentum of, right? We need more people contributing, honestly. And I think that's what's special about this conversation today, right? Because you have many different age groups which can see like it's possible, right? Like when I was 17 years old, I'll be really honest with you, I didn't expect in my life that I would be able to get to, standing on a stage in Geneva during the UN's AI for Good Global Summit and speaking, right? I wasn't actually capable of dreaming that for myself at a young age,
Right.
Because I didn't know that was possible. Just like, honestly, I didn't know it was possible that a 17-year-old could be in 12th grade in high school and a prolific AI researcher, right? Like, if I had known that when I was a kid, I might have tried it. You're right.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that we show people what's possible, so that they understand the real limits and the real boundaries of where you can go if you just dedicate yourself, and what good you can do if you kind of ritualistically focus your energy on a greater good, and how far that can really get you in your life, throughout your life.
Yeah, and I feel like with that, and even going back to like the digital literacy point, I think even now it's something that not so many people are aware about, even in just my classroom. And there even is a stat around, I think 65% of young people, if you went up to them and asked them, do you know what AI is or how it even impacts your daily life? Not many people would be aware. And I think even with that, there's also, then even touching about data and privacy, there can become like so many issues with that as well. But just getting people to the same playing level where everyone knows about what AI is and what the impact it is on their life, I think when we can get to that point in time, we've really come to a point where it's like, where the possibilities I think are limitless.
That's a brilliant idea, and I think that would serve as a great framework for being able to better educate multiple nations at the same time, right? So if you set a framework of like what the minimum is that a population should be proficient for in technology and in artificial intelligence, I think that would standardize the conversation globally. And some of the work that we do at the United Nations would be a great fit for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it's like if it can be something that's regulated and it is standard for populations all across the world, then maybe this can be something that's not seen as a threat or something that's not seen as, I think right now what governments are so afraid of is, wow, AI is something that's out of control and we don't know how to handle it and it's taking over the world and it has really bad consequences. But I think what they lack is really that understanding of what it is. It's not something that's taking over the world. It's really just a tool that I think when it can be in the wrong hands can be used for wrong reasons.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you everyone for joining as well. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you.
Using AI for social good, building a strong future for generations to come. Thank you so much, Alisha and Dominick.